should Lance Stroll be in Formula 1? If you ask that question to most people, you'd get one answer: no. Especially after his performance in 2023, where the gap to teammate Alonso was bigger than that of some of this year's rookie drivers to their teammates. Many chalk this up to Stroll never quite having what it takes to be at the top level in F1. And instead of being in the sport by merit, he instead enjoys an extended stay in the sport due to the fact his father has financially backed or owned the teams he's been racing for. However, at the end of the day, you can't solely rely on money to race in F1, especially not nowadays. And Stroll has shown his moments. Podiums in Baku and Sakir, for example, or the impressive pole position in Turkey, and even the P3 in qualifying in Brazil this year. He is capable of impressive racing at times. When looking for reasons as to why Stroll does deserve an F1 seat, there is at least one other piece of evidence that tends to be used, which is the fact that Lance Stroll had arguably the most dominant F3 season ever. 2016 was Lance Stroll's second Formula 3 season, and he was pitted against a reasonable grid. In terms of F1 drivers, you had George Russell fighting Stroll that season, with Russell actually finishing third overall, and although Lando Norris would take part in a few races, he wouldn't be serious competition that season. Guan Yu Zhou and the greatest Formula 1 driver ever, Nikita Mazepin, would also take part in this season as rookies. So it's safe to say, although it wasn't the most competitive Formula 3 grid ever in terms of proven F1 talent, in a spec series, no driver ever has an easy time. Although there are some other factors involved in which we'll get back to later. Let's first of all have a look at the season as a whole and Stroll's results. First of all, the young Stroll would win 14 races across the season out of 30 that were held. And he would also see 20 podiums. This would give him the championship win by 187 points to second place, and his teammate was second, Maximilian Gunther. The team Stroll was racing for at this point was PREMA Racing, which for those unfamiliar with junior formula categories is one of the best teams you can drive for in that stage of your career, with usually the largest budgets and the best engineers and equipment, giving the team a bit of an advantage compared to other small junior teams. As always, Daddy Stroll also made sure to fill the pockets of those facilitating his son's racing, which again we'll get back to later. For the most part then, this looks good for Lance. He was able to comfortably destroy his opponents in a spec series, achieving a win rate of just under 50% across a full 30 race season. Even if he wasn't winning, he only finished outside the top 5 twice over the full season. And here's where I'm going to defend Stroll. Yes, you can't do this on a fluke. Winning this many races at this level of impressive domination is not something easily done in a junior series renowned for how close its racing is. But Stroll did have some other advantages that made his life a little easier in the series. We'll start with the obvious, Daddy Stroll himself, the man whose pockets get progressively lighter each time his son decides to send it into the wall at about 200 odd mile an hour. Of course, Lawrence was very willing and able to give PREMA what was necessary to ensure his son's success, and that was cold hard cash, which some have argued helped assist in Stroll's advantage over his teammates, with there being many reports that other PREMA drivers were told not to fight with Lance and instead let him through. In fact, the one and only George Russell was very outspoken against this, saying it's a shame that you can't get anywhere in this sport without paying for it, while normal guys like myself are trying to compete for the championship. And him thoroughly believing that Lance was let through by his teammate in the opening round at Paul Ricard, despite protests from the teammate in question who said it was just a mistake. Russell clearly saw through the facade. But there was also a couple different models of car run that year, with Lance running the Laurus F316 powered by a Mercedes engine, and as previously mentioned, with the PREMA team. Now, no other PREMA drivers got this model of car, with Gunther, who was in P2 in the championship behind Stroll, running the F315 with a Mercedes engine still, and George Russell was also in the F315 with a Mercedes engine, although was driving for High-Tech GP as opposed to PREMA. And we've already established that PREMA is the team with the most advantage when it comes to everything setup related. So at this point, it's very easy to sit there and point out that Stroll had superior machinery and therefore won, but it's not actually that easy. There was actually 7 other drivers on the grid who competed with the same chassis and engine as Stroll. Nikita Mazepin being one of them, so I suppose it doesn't count if the chassis is pointing the wrong way half the time. But many of these drivers with the F316 were outclassed by the F315 chassis, which actually seemed to have the small advantage over most other drivers during the season. So again, yeah, while it is easy to say the inequality of the machinery was the reason Stroll so comfortably beat Russell, I think it's important to note that these differences were minor, and although Stroll likely did get dibs on the best engines too, as well as seemingly having little to no competition from his teammates, at the end of the day, he did still have to put in the performances to achieve such great success. So what I'm saying is take a balanced approach to this. It's fine to point out the advantages he had, but there is still a hell of a lot of skill involved in driving at such a level. There is, however, one big mistake I do think Stroll made in regards to this season, and that's that once he achieved this feat, he skipped Formula 2 and went straight to F1, which is what I and many see as a big fault of Lance's career. It's been felt that ever since Stroll joined F1, he's always been on the verge of achieving his full potential. Hints of good drives here and there, but never that consistency that makes up the full package of an F1 driver, and it leaves you feeling like he's a rookie, when in fact, he's been on the grid longer than Norris, Leclerc, Russell, who we now see as drivers verging on their prime, if not in it already. Had Stroll had a year or two to continue building his skills in F2, maybe he would have entered F1 with more confidence and more skills, but instead, it feels like we've missed out on the Stroll that could have been. And at the end of the day, it might just be time to make room for someone else instead. Subscribe and like the video to help out as we're trying to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Goodbye.